Is ChatGPT the end of search? And is it the end for Google search? And what does it all mean for SEOs? In this presentation, I will break down my answer for those questions and explain why I answer the way I do. So let's get going. ChatGPT and the future of search. So long term, does Google care about AI generated content? The answer is no. They don't care about it. And that is because in the limit, AI generated content can be assumed to be as good or better than what humans can produce. And when that is true, Google will not favor human content. Google will do what Google has always done, which is favor the best content. So their official stance is that they don't care. Now, that is the long-term answer. The short-term answer is that AI is not as good as humans. So when you use AI to mass produce content for the purpose of gaming SEO results, it is considered black hat. It is considered spamming, and Google frowns upon that in the short term. So the best content, therefore, has what is called a human in the loop. So let's get that out of the way. Now, it is important when we're talking about these topics that we get a little bit of context here, a little bit of extra information. What is a GPT? There's 3 letters in there. The G stands for generative, P for pre-trained, and T for transformer. And generative just means that it generates a sequence of tokens. Pre-trained means that it was trained up to a certain moment in time. That means after another moment in time, the model does not know anything anymore. So it maybe at 3.5 knows stuff up to Q4 of 2021 and nothing of the world after that. So if the aliens landed on the planet tomorrow, GPT would still write as if that had not happened yet. Transformer. Now this is the very important innovation here. First invented in the paper, attention is all you need. And we'll talk a bit more about attention in a moment. But transformers excel at sequence to sequence problem solving. So put one sequence in and get another sequence out. Protein, DNA, music can be converted in a sequence, and even text, which is where a GPT is most used for. And so why is this attention mechanism so important? It is because attention is the foundation of intelligence. So why is attention so powerful? We all know that if we lack attention or we have an overload of attention, our human brain shuts down. And the idea is that when you teach a computer algorithm to have attention, it now becomes focused. Otherwise, it is lost in too much data. And so this attention mechanism will focus both forward-looking and backward-looking in a stream of text. It will understand where to put its attention to. In other words, it knows how to train its weights and predict things based on its attention mechanism. So it feels intelligent because of its attention mechanism. And this really is not turned out, it's not the only thing we needed, but it is the thing that unlocked basically this entire revolution of AI, so to speak, this attention mechanism. Now, search engines are actually already very large attention mechanisms. If you think about it, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So to not overload us with information, their goal is to sift through the billions of web pages and find the handful that are most exquisitely optimized for what you needed at that time in that moment. Attention mechanism and chat have a lot in common because of the transformer architecture. But Google search and attention problems have a lot in common because the nature of search is one of attention. And so with that, we're making our first conclusion here. Google is very similar in a sense to an attention problem. But if you look at their mission to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible and useful, now organizing the world's information, how do you do that? You do that in databases. You have to store it somehow. Now, Google cannot on its server store every character of every page or every byte. It cannot duplicate the web on its servers. That would be too expensive. So it has to compress that knowledge somehow in an index. Did you know that AI models like ChatGPT are also compressing knowledge? They're practicing a form of lossy compression. And this is a way to think about it. It does not store your file or your data, but it stores weights associated that it learned from it. So you can think of it as a form of lossy compression, very lossy compression. What's an example of that? Your MP3 file, your JPEG file, because there are certain pixels the eye can't distinguish, and there's certain audio tones the ear can't distinguish from one another. Now, if you had perfect spectrum hearing, an MP3 file sounds terrible. And if you had maybe superhuman eyesight and superhuman displays, you might think a JPEG looks horrible. But it is because the human eye and the human ear can't perceive certain stuff that we can afford losing that information that cannot be perceived. So it is important to draw this parallel here, because a search engine like Google and ChatGPT are both, in a way, organizing the world's information. They're just doing it in a very different way. Instead of a database and knowledge graph, GPT is storing it in a weighted model, weighted attention. So it is still compressed knowledge, just a form of compression, even more extravagantly small. It is losing a lot more information than Google does, but it is compressed knowledge nonetheless. Otherwise, it couldn't pass a medical exam and give more accurate answers than wrong answers. If it did not cram, in a sense, while training, it couldn't replicate that information in some sense. Not as reliable because there's a lot of lossy stuff going on here, but still, it is compressed knowledge. And so we already have identified a second commonality between search engines and GPT. Moving on, we talked about parameters and we talked about tokens. Now, parameters are like weights. Weights is what you learn. More weights means smarter model. Tokens are common text sequences. And so you can put things in perspective. GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters and almost 500 billion tokens that it was trained on. The tokens is how much information it sees when training. And parameters is how many weights it retains, how much memory storage it has, so to speak. So the more memory capacity it has, the larger the model, the more weights you have, the more memory and CPU you need, the slower the model takes to run, but also the more expensive it is to run because it requires more memory and CPU or GPU cycles. However, also how smarter the output. So the world has been trying to push these models to have more weights and more weights and more weights. And as a result, you hear of bigger and bigger models. This is not actually what we want. So in a sense, yes, but in another sense, they keep getting bigger and more expensive and slower the bigger these models run. So it is not just the number of parameters that matters, but also how optimally weighted they are. We'll talk about that in a second. But when we increase the parameters, magic happens. And so here is an image from Google's Palm research paper that shows what happened when we trained an AI model that had a lot more parameters to it. And it is like magic because more centers of cognition are appearing the larger the model becomes. And it is almost like watching a child grow up, taking his first steps, learning to speak, learning to write, learning to do math in school, and graduating. So it is very important that these models keep growing in size to unlock new functionality. However, it is also problematic because these models become too big to run efficiently and cost efficient. So now we get to our friend Ethan. And Ethan is an edgy personality, which means that he takes somewhat of a bold stance on this. Maybe some might describe it as overconfident, but he is not necessarily wrong in his overconfidence. It is just not proven yet. And he could be right. What is Ethan saying? Ethan is saying that scale is all you need at this point. The problem of intelligence is solved by transformers and their attention mechanism. Attention is all you need. But to make it more intelligent, Ethan is saying scale is all you need. So he's saying is just blow up the models, make them bigger. And to an extent, as you saw in the previous slide, that is true. The Palm model got smarter and smarter as it became larger and larger. But as we discussed, there are problems with that because the larger these parameters, the more weights you have. That means the bigger the model, that requires more CPU and memory to run. And at some point, intelligence can become so smart that it becomes inefficient to run. And so if you look at the human brain is extremely efficient using its energy for intelligence. And so until a computer can be as efficient to run, that intelligence may just be crippling. Right? We all have seen movies like A Beautiful Mind where you have really a hyper intelligent individual but is seriously impaired in some way in a social sense. And it is not inconceivable that a super intelligence might be achieved when it has a very large model at some point that just becomes too expensive to run. It would be much better to just let humans do the work. And when a model like that is too expensive to run, it beats the entire purpose because that means you can't scale it. And if you can't scale it, then the idea of cheap compute on the internet where everybody can have a website and everybody can have a computer at home and so forth and so on, that idea would be broken. Scale might be true. That scale might be all you need to get to super intelligence. It does not mean that it automatically solves all the problems we need to solve in order to have a super intelligent in an abundant sense. So this brings me to the Chinchilla scaling law. It's a paper from DeepMind, a Google sister company. And they discovered, and it's been now a little while ago, that data or tokens the parameters are trained on and not the size of the model, not the parameters, is currently holding back large language modeling performance. Now, what it means is if you had 4 boxes where you could store stuff that was most important to you, 4 memories, and I only showed you a single room of the house, then you're going to pick your attention mechanism will pick out the 4 most important items from that room. If I show you 2 rooms, that's like showing you more data or tokens. You still only have 4 parameters, but now you can pick the 4 most important things out of 2 rooms. And the Chinchilla scaling law says that currently we said, we can make the model smarter. Instead of 4 slots or boxes, let's give you 8. Let's double that. But I still only show you 1 room. And so the Chinchilla scaling law said that the ratio of the number of rooms you saw and the number of boxes you could store or little items was off. It says that intelligence doesn't just increase by making the models bigger, but also by showing you more stuff, showing you more rooms to pick important stuff from. And naturally, you can think about this like human experience too. Adults don't grow an extra brain. It's not like we have a second and third and fourth and fifth brain as we grow up. Let's just say a young person has a fully developed brain. At some point, you don't get a bigger brain just because you go from 21 to 80 years old. So what does change is your experience. And the more experience you have, you can compare that to the number of tokens or data you have seen. The more you are able to make decisions wisely and from experience. And the same is true for these neural networks. There's a lot of commonality with the human brain. The Chinchilla scaling law basically says that The current generation of AI that you have interacted with have not seen enough rooms in the house, and therefore they're not as smart as they could be. And instead of going from 4 boxes or storing 4 items to 8, if you would keep it at 4, but see more rooms, you can actually have a better representation of what was important in your life. Better attention, better intelligence. So the Chinchilla scaling law goes back to that concept of attention. It just says that experience and data matters a great deal when setting these parameter weights and making better weights, better decisions, better outcomes, better intelligence. So what that means is that the next generation of scale, the next generation of AI, may have a smaller model, but just see so much more data that it actually outperforms models that have a lot more boxes but have not seen as many rooms. Now, this is very important because online, let's dispel this myth. We see so many articles of people saying, oh, GPT-4 will be 1 trillion parameters. Let me tell you, I don't necessarily want GPT-4 to be 1 trillion parameters unless the cost of GPUs drops 5x. I don't want our applications to take 5 times as long to run. I don't want my cost to increase 5x. What we really want is maybe a slight increase in parameters, a massive increase in data that it saw, but that would not increase the cost to run the model. That would just increase the cost to train the model. And this is why the expectations that you see around GPT are not necessarily good assumptions. At this point, people are begging to be disappointed. So at the end of the day, nobody cares how many parameters or tokens are in there. Nobody cares whether transformers were used or not. What you care about is how impressive the intelligence is, how fast it can answer, and how cost efficient and reliable the service is. That's it. You don't care about all the technical mumbo jumbo. But what I'm here to say is that if we do go to these very large models, they become cost prohibitive to make available at a massive scale at this point until hardware becomes even more abundant. Now, there's good news, like the cost of running these models has really been keeping up with the innovation so far. I hope that continues. And as we are going to see, with scale is all you need, the problem is going to be more efficient training, more efficient running of these models, and more efficient hardware and breakthroughs in material science and manufacturing that are going to unlock super intelligence. With the current hardware and the current technology we have, we cannot achieve the scale that we need at this time. Right? So really important for people to understand when they interact with a ChatGPT based on 3.5, there is a limitation in intelligence that is hardware bound, just like we have human limitations on how high we can jump. Our hardware or legs have limitations. And so it's important to note. But it's also, hopefully this dispels the myth around GPT-4. Most likely it will be a little bit bigger or available in a little bit bigger edition, but it will be seeing a lot more data when training, meaning that it could be vastly smarter than GPT-3 at a comparable price point, at a comparable speed of output, which means that the consumer applications in search and more are going to be incredibly accessible and impressive going forward, but not yet your hyper intelligence, so to speak. Okay, that brings us to a not so theoretical problem, really, the alignment problem. Let's hypothetically say that we did achieve the necessary scale to achieve super intelligence. It's just a matter of time. It's not an if, but when. And assuming Ethan is right and scale is all we need. What is the next problem? How do you make sure that such an intelligence does not turn into a Terminator bent on destroying us? So if you have a very powerful machine, let's just go like a sports car, pick your favorite car, and it had no steering wheel, and it was not autonomous. A machine without steering is useless to humans. It would just be another creature doing its own thing. And so why would we even create something that doesn't benefit us in some way, doesn't do some work, doesn't achieve something? So alignment is what that is called. So making the AI do what you're asking it to do. Now, OpenAI has started that work in alignment from its own experience. So at first it put out GPT-3 in the market, and people were asking it to do stuff. And they would say, write a blog or write me an answer to this question. And very frequently, GPT-3 would not answer people what they really wanted. OpenAI retrained their weights to be more aligned. The output is more aligned with the input. That means that the AI is more doing what you want it to do. And so then they released the models called Instruct GPT, and they have been available to developers for a while. And Instruct GPT is exactly what it sounds like. When you're asking it to do something, it actually tries its very best to do that. And ChatGPT is just one more step on top of that. And so it uses reinforcement learning with human feedback loop. And so you could say that the model was pre-trained, but after it is pre-trained, the weights are refined based on human feedback. And there's a layer, a system after the pre-training now. Whenever you interact with ChatGPT, it is additionally learning from human feedback. And so with ChatGPT, what they did is they took the pre-trained model, they had humans do a manual pass and say, this is not safe, you should never say that. And these human labelers have a very high weight to it all. And then every single time you use this ChatGPT, there's a massive amount of data being processed every day of human feedback. And so that is further reinforcing the weights and telling the AI, despite everything you've read, you shouldn't say that. And that was what missing from Microsoft's Twitter bot of yore. Once upon a time, they made a Twitter bot and it turned into this raving racist that would enable another Holocaust if it could on Twitter. And Microsoft had to shut it down. So intent and alignment are what makes AI useful. If it's not aligned with your intent, if it doesn't do what you want it to do, then it is not useful. It might be interesting, but it's not useful. And that brings me back to Google's mission statement. Google's mission is to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. So my next argument here is that the reason we are seeing these conversations, is this the end of Google and so forth and so on, is because the alignment problem and intent alignment is the same thing that Google has been solving for us. And GPT is technology that's just another way to solve intent alignment. And so this is why you see so many comparisons between the two technologies and why people are saying this is the end of Google, or ask the question at least. So we have seen a lot of parallels so far. So let's compare. We're going to call it Transformers because GPT and OpenAI are not the only game in town, right? Meta is in the race, Cohere, AI21 Labs, Microsoft had its own models, even Google has its own Transformers. So we're just going to call it Transformers because there's more than one, right? There's Optimus Prime, there's Bumblebee, there's more than one Transformer. And let's go and look at these statements, right? So first of all, Google is intent on organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible and make it useful. How does Google do that? It organizes the world's information in knowledge graphs and databases. It makes it universally accessible via the search page, the homepage of Google, and the Google Assistant, wildly popular, and making the information useful. And so that they achieve that with RankBrain, which is a form of human reinforcement learning, human feedback reinforcement learning. And every time you use Chrome or the browser or Android or visit a property with Google Analytics or double click tracking on there, etc., etc. Google is measuring your user behavior in reaction to your intent. So it is looking at your search intent and it is measuring whether it aligns with user behavior once you encounter the intent. It is measuring how much you are aligned. And it uses that to reinforce its own weights to understand whether a page is useful for you or not, or contains useful information. In other words, Google has this idea of what you're looking for. Transformers organize the world's information not in knowledge graphs and databases, but in model weights, the parameter count. They stored it as a sort of lossy compressed information. They make information universally accessible via chat and prompting, and they make it useful thanks to alignment research. This is currently the biggest difference between OpenAI and other transformer products, is that they have done more work in alignment research than perhaps some of their competitors, at least the ones that are publicly available. The current winner for this is really Google. But in the first category of organizing the world's information, it's a no contest. It is an absolute crushing victory for Google. And that is because Google crawls more information, sees more information, indexes more information, and provides more factual and reliable information than anybody else. And they have more than a decade of experience doing that. The other two are really close. I would say making it universally accessible is a toss-up, because we have seen that a chat interface is extremely useful to make information accessible, right? 100+ million people have signed up for ChatGPT because it is so easy to use, and accessibility is important. Right, so this is the first time we have seen a paradigm shift really in the interface of how you consume search since the voice assistant. And really, chat is a form of the Google Assistant. So it's not that Google does not have good interfaces. It's just that we have this paradigm shift in how people want to interact with it also on screens. And then making information useful, I will say that Google is still the winner. Now, it is definitely up for debate for some people in some use cases. For example, if I am a coder, I might say that the transformers are making this data more useful, because my coding problems are not just solved with linking to a web page where I can find an answer, maybe, but it actually also is giving me code examples, and that's infinitely more useful. But on the other hand, it also includes very frequently wrong data and wrong answers. And when it comes to matters of your life and your money, you cannot rely on that data. So in other words, there is a lot left to be wanting from transformers in terms of making data that's useful, that is also reliable and factual. And so for that reason, I am still calling it for Google in this department. How are we trying to, and say we, collective we, humanity, AI researchers, how are we trying to overcome these things? Organizing the world's information is, we're trying to combine these knowledge graphs with transformers. And so you can think about this as a human being with a general intelligence, giving it a open book exam, and the human is then able to make sure that what it says is in alignment with the facts in the book, but it applies a general level of reasoning on that information and its level of interpretation. And that is something that is happening right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Making it universally accessible, that means that we are likely to see chat become part of search, but also search to become part of chat. So a chat that is able to browse the web, and a search page that is able to chat with you about its web search results. And making it more useful, reinforcement learning with human feedback at a massive data scale. and solve the pre-trained problem, the P in GPT, by adding a form of post-training, which is what the reinforcement learning is trying to add. But all it can do with reinforcement learning with human feedback is steering the weights. It cannot teach the AI brand new things at this time. But when it can, and I believe it will in the future, it will be an incredible breakthrough for the industry. So you already see it happening. Wolfram Alpha suggested to combine with ChatGPT. Microsoft, Bing, and OpenAI are going to launch an answer engine inside of search, and Google is expected to make its Google Assistant available for users in a similar sense. As we said, it's like a human taking an open book exam, and it is a phenomenal way to combine the benefits of search technology and accessibility and usefulness. And interesting fact is that on this, just a little bit about the company that I work at, Ink for All. When Google introduced this reinforcement learning component with RankBrain around 2016, I was working in machine learning already at the time, and I saw how neural networks were changing the game. And I said that at that time that neural networks were going to be used to influence the quality of content that you see in Google search results. And so at that time, we started working in an agency and created our own agency and built technology, AI technology, that kind of reverse engineers this process. So at inkforall.com, this is a spin-off from that agency that inherited all the technology, so to speak, spun it out. We created this ability to look at the highest ranking results, and with neural networks, build a real-time AI model to understand why is Google ranking this high. So it's not just in Google, it's any search algorithm that ranks content. There is a reason why it is ranking higher. It's because they make more money if they give you better search results, right? That's the fundamentals. Or better product results, if you think about e-commerce. But then when GPT-2 and transformers came around, it became obvious to me that transformer technology would be combined with knowledge graphs at that point. And so inkforall.com is an AI writing content creation product that reads your top performing competitors, reverse engineers them, builds a knowledge graph of facts and information, and then builds on top of transformers to create content that is more factual, more human, more interesting, more relevant to your audience than anything out there. And so we've already got a patent issued, fully issued, not even pending, around this. And I'm only mentioning this because you can believe what I'm talking about when it comes to this topic, because these are things that I had worked on and predicted and was so confident that would happen that we spent money on attorneys to codify those inventions. And this is the future. And the strength of combining search with transformers, knowledge graphs with transformers, is that you get the best of both worlds. So these search engines index the web and gather data and compile information and find out with reinforcement learning what people really care to know, what is authoritative, what is trustworthy, and so forth and so on. And then you give that like an open book to a transformer who does not need to know the entirety of the world and the entirety of the web at all times. When you combine those two technologies, you make magic. And so this is what you can expect to see in search very soon. Now, somebody asked me, are you team Microsoft and OpenAI or team like Google? And they made a recent acquisition as well in the chat AI space. But I would say that people are creatures of habits, and Google is still the most impressive in terms of its knowledge graph and in terms of its reinforcement learning, because of analytics, because of Google, because of Android, because of Chromium browsers, because of a double-click network, you name it, YouTube. Every acquisition Google has made has been a data play. It's all been about intent. That's it. You can look at all of its acquisitions in this space, and it's all been about having more information about what people really want with content. That's it. And when it didn't turn out to provide better data, then they shut it down, like circles and their social network hobbies. But I would say Google is still best positioned to be the dominant player. What is likely to happen here is that Bing might get a little bit more market share, but it's unlikely to dethrone Google. They run the most popular search engine, the most popular voice assistant, the most popular mobile operating system, the most popular browser, the most popular video platform, the most popular analytics platform, the most popular content marketing. And you get my point. Google has more data than anyone else. And I've said this many times before. I'll just repeat it on this video if you have not heard me say it before. Bing and Microsoft don't have worse engineers than Google per se. Okay, it's not like they don't know how to code or make a great search engine. The difference between Google and other search engines is data monopoly. Google has monopolized the oil, so they control manufacturing. In the search sense, they have controlled the data, monopolized the data. Therefore, they have monopolized search. You want to break up Google, break up their data empire, and you will see search becoming more competitive. And this is what Bing is doing right now. It is a good thing for the search engine industry. It means that innovation will happen. It means that Google can't get away with half of their page being a giant advertisement, right? Google didn't used to be that way. It just progressively keeps becoming more and more monetized. Competition can be good for consumers in that sense, right? So let's move on. One way that people have done this is by combining search results with transformers. Here you can see two examples. And this is most likely what is going to happen, right? You see a search engine knowledge graph combined with transformer to summarize the findings. But very important here. Note how the sources are still there. And that is not going to go away. I will argue that very strongly in this presentation. You also have other examples where ChatGPT is side by side Google search through a Chrome extension, and then people can upvote and downvote and see and basically show ChatGPT a plugin there if ChatGPT provided a better search experience than Google or not. And it's a way to train future models. Now, if you have paid notice so far, my thesis is actually that to unlock the power of a transformer for search, you still very much need to have data. You need the data. So the best crawlers are going to have the most data, and therefore we should not just look at search competitive landscape from a perspective of who has the best transformer. I believe transformers are going to be commoditized and be quite common. So the architecture for a GPT is open source. It's out there. You can build your own GPT if you know how to code. The only constraint is how much time and money you have to train it. And GPTs will be common. What is going to separate them is the data, and the world is constantly producing a stream of new data. And the crawlers, the search engine bots, commercial crawlers, and more that are seeing more of the internet and seeing more data are having a huge advantage here. What does that mean? It means that you might see an Ahrefs search engine, right? Because they crawl a whole lot. That's what this means. And yet this image came from an Ahrefs article. But you can see where Yahoo is, Baidu, Microsoft, SEMrush, Facebook. These are the companies that are really in the running to take advantage of this kind of technology in the context of search. Moving on, interfaces do matter. So this is a headline from late last year where it was reported that Alexa was a colossal failure on pace to lose $10 billion in 1 year. As it turns out, people don't want to buy stuff over voice. Interesting. So give them a screen and they'll buy, right? So why have you seen Echoes, Amazon Alexas with screens? People wanted to see what they were buying. So interfaces matter. How we consume data matters. So voice or chat is not a universal interface that works for every single use case. And this is important to keep in mind. Humans have habits, and those habits are really hard to break. So vinyl may become CD, and then CD goes extinct and we go back to vinyl. Radio becomes podcast. Doesn't go away. It just transforms. Photo albums, maybe Instagram. MTV becomes YouTube, becomes shorts. Newspapers become news websites. Paper letters become email. And search will become better search. So search will not disappear. It will evolve. The fundamental need to discover information remains. And the fundamental medium to discover information, search, will remain. It will just evolve. The only thing that can replace search is a better search. Remember the attention problem. We get overwhelmed if we have too much information. With more content being produced than ever before in human history, it is more important than ever before in human history that you can filter through that information with attention problem solver. And that is the mission of search. So search does not go away. Now let's move on to monetization and the economy of the web. And I call this the content attention economy. So the deal is that we allow search engines and AI to index our data and make it accessible for profit. Make no mistake, Google is making billions of dollars on your information collectively. In exchange, they send traffic to our sites. What happens if they stop doing that? You stop sharing your information with them. That means they can't operate a search engine. ChatGPT is no different. If they are not able to access your information, they can't be smart. And if they can't be smart, they have no economic use case. Therefore, economy dictates that the backlink, the traffic source from search, cannot and will not go away. That means that content marketing will not go away. GPT does not provide sources for knowledge right now. And it cannot replace search engines for that reason. And it is not likely to be in the interest of OpenAI to become a search engine. I think OpenAI very much prefers to remain a research company that creates models and does AI research. But other people can use OpenAI's technology, and again, other solutions exist. Transformer technology is more accurate. Others can use it to integrate it into a search type of problem solution that does have attribution, right? So GPT on its own will not replace or be the next generation of search. It may be combined with other solutions in an interface that is an evolution of search, but it will not replace search and not on its own. And when it is combined with a search engine type of solution, it must contain backlinks. Otherwise, it is not economically viable. It will die out. People will start putting their sites behind paywalls, and it will be the end of the billion-dollar money-making machine that is search. Then there's the ownership problem. Right? We have seen this before in news. Even a backlink is sometimes not enough of a payment. The European Union has granted publishers additional rights over their content with consent-based criteria for inclusion and use in products like Google News. What does that mean? What does that consent look like? Pay up. That's what it looks like. Right? So news outlets. Why pay news outlets versus your website? Your website may not contribute brand new information, or your website may not sell products If your main product is new information, like news outlets, you don't get any benefit from Google taking your information, reading your article, and then regurgitating it online without sending you a subscriber or money and so forth. The ownership problem is real, and we're going to see a lot of litigation worldwide related to the ownership problem and ChatGPT. Because ChatGPT, when and if allowed to read your news article, it is not providing attribution. And attribution, as you see, is not always sufficient payment. And under the EU regulatory framework, it needs to be consent-based criteria that govern this kind of operation. So do not expect OpenAI to all of a sudden have access to the latest news in its latest model unless they start paying up, just like Google had to do. Then there's the memorization problem, which is just here to illustrate how the ownership problem can be an issue for transformers. And you can see Stability AI has a memorization rate. It's a very small memorization rate, but it does have a memorization rate. And this is just to once again underscore that these transformer models, these weights, are really just compressed knowledge. Right? If it was not compressed knowledge, the image on the right would be impossible to achieve. So it's very lossy, but in some cases it can be more lossy or less lossy than other cases. And interestingly too, Stack Overflow banned ChatGPT generated answers. Why? They said it's too often inaccurate. But actually ChatGPT, among its training sources, is reported to have been trained on Stack Overflow. The interesting thing about this is that Stack Overflow's data included both correct and incorrect answers. Interesting. So if its attention was focused on correct answers only, perhaps ChatGPT would have been better. But I have personally seen that ChatGPT generated answers that are very close to an answer I saw on Stack Overflow on the same problem. Fascinating. Who would have thought that it would follow the patterns of the data that it was trained on? So combine memorization as a problem, the lossy compression component, with the problem of ownership and problem of attribution in the attention economy, and you get this idea, this really good idea that you can't really divorce attribution and the economy of ownership from this new transformer technology. It is something that has to be figured out. We are talking about data monopolies. And so how do you differentiate in a world where everybody has this kind of GPT transformer style intelligence? The quality is going to be determined by the quality of the data. And so this here, I've already made the case that search is not going to go away. Search will just be replaced by a better search. I've already made the case that the contenders for the next search interface are the ones who have access to the best crawling data. And so what I'm underscoring with this slide here is that the only competitive advantage you can have in such a technological future here is data. And so expect companies to look for data monopolies. People who have access to exclusive data or exclusive insights are going to have the ability to create a smarter AI. And so one such data monopoly that you're seeing is, for example, the real world. The real world is an uncharted frontier for robotic AI. Tesla's robotics and autonomous driving projects are really good examples of data monopolies. Surprising perhaps, but mapping more streets than everybody else. Or in the case of a humanoid robot, mapping interaction with the real world and experiencing physics is data as well. And so the company that gets a head start on such data has a competitive advantage. On the web, we are going to see a resurgence of paywall communities. Companies like Substack, where you have trusted authors that do not share their data with the AI bots. And the only way you can get that new information is through such membership to such sources. Also, manufacturers who make products, they are the first to have the information about their new car. So they are going to perhaps control how that information goes out to the public and create a data monopoly or use their data in a clever way to exchange it for attention in the attention economy. And so if you are a company now and you have access to data that only your company has, that is a monetization play for the near future. But actually, there is more to this, because AI will get to a point where it can also invent net new information. And we already see that in biological research. Remember, transformers excel at translating sequences to other sequences. And your DNA sequence or your protein sequences are biological sequences. And transformers are also really good at that. So they can sequence and simulate medications in your body and accelerate medical developments with AI. AI is able to solve math problems and much more. At some point, AI will just be inventing or take a role in inventing almost everything going forward. So we know at a certain time, human knowledge becomes public domain. And what if after some future time, AI contributes to almost all future human knowledge? Then that will become public domain, because it looks like, at least right now, AI systems cannot patent inventions. That was recently confirmed by the US Federal Circuit Court. Right? So is the future of knowledge open source? Is the future of knowledge public domain? Trade secrets are going to become important, but trade secrets are only going to be possible if you have access to unique data. And bringing this back to search, who has the best data on the web, on information? Who has the best data? Google does. Google has a data monopoly. Therefore, Google will not be dethroned anytime soon. And so that is my thesis around this and why I believe these things. SEO is not going to go anywhere, because as long as people search, there's a need for optimization. We have a new knowledge economy. And so knowledge that is human and novel will retain value for a while. Knowledge that is common knowledge or AI invented will either be kept trade secret or become public domain. And at some point in the future, when all information becomes public domain, search engines won't even need to ask your permission. They will not need legal attribution for sending you traffic for what is considered public domain. However, they will still do it. I believe they will still do it, because removing attribution will also kill the content attention economy, meaning that search engines would no longer get access to your juicy, novel, new human information. And do not forget, there's the consumption side of content as well. As long as humans control the dollars and humans control the attention, what they spend time on, right? The data that humans produce is not only what they write, but also what they choose to consume and engage with. And so search engines need those humans for a good while longer. So this is not going to go away, even if it from a legal perspective wouldn't have to be necessary. It will be necessary from a data perspective. And so I want to point out that these transformers and these technologies are not just restricted to text. There are a lot of companies I could shout out here. 11 Labs has made phenomenal text to voice and voice cloning technology that is in many cases indistinguishable from human. So expect unbelievable things about content. Unbelievable things in terms of quality of content. Flawless AI does a similar thing with lip syncing. It is translating text, changing text, and making the actor say different things without reshooting it. There's virtual influencers. Infinite Future is a World of Warcraft with ever evolving storylines that are personalized to you. Endless Seinfeld episodes. They are quite bad right now, but they are going to get ridiculously good. And you can imagine Pick your favorite universe, Marvel Comics, Star Wars, whatnot, and being in there fully immersed. And you can imagine that immersion to increase with virtual reality, like Sword Art Online, and eventually creating infinite fantasy worlds in whatever universe or metaverse you want to lose yourself in. So these are things that are really happening. So the world of content is going to change quite a bit in the future, and what you may not be able to believe it, right? Not everything you'll be able to believe it, because how convincing and compelling it will become.
So let's talk about what AI cannot do. Well, AI can't bleed. It lacks the human experience. The rush of adrenaline, falling in love, becoming a father. The first-hand human experience is something an AI cannot provide. And that means that marketing needs to become a lot more human and empathetic. So what do brands do in light of all these changes? Well, search will evolve. It will not go away. It will continue to be essential, and it will continue to be a major traffic source for your business. As long as there is search, there's need to optimize content. Traffic will continue to go to the best content, the most trusted brands who provide a superior experience. And SEOs will continue to optimize for such outcomes. The job of SEO is to optimize client outcomes and navigate them through the changes. Help brands build authority, optimize their content so that their users experience quality.
Well, that's it for this presentation, but there's a lot more to say about the topic, and I hope to see you again in a next video where we're going to break down some of the things as they are developing. I hope it helps you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.